What does Escape the Backrooms hide from the player off camera? Escape the Backrooms is a co-op horror experience where you and your teammates must traverse a multitude of backrooms locations. As you press on, you will face different entities and solve puzzles as you attempt to escape this horrific liminal prison. Today, we'll be taking a look out of bounds in search of things we're not usually supposed to see. Like, did you know the Howler is actually always present on level 0? We'll also be breaking the game a bit as we go, so I hope you enjoyed today's look behind the scenes of Escape the Backrooms. For those watching, very quickly, but my horror game I've been working on just released a new trailer. If you love my videos, you'll probably love my game, so check it out in the description below and give it a wishlist on Steam. Now, because each of these areas contain unique entities and puzzles, I'll be recapping them as we go, starting with level 0. So the very first level we complete is the lobby. And within it is a seemingly endless maze of these faded yellow walls. We must make our way through these winding halls until we find a broken ladder. And after putting it back together, we will obtain a key used to reach the exit. Also, after a few minutes, this level's entity, the Howler, will start appearing on the map, giving chase whenever it spots you. Before you can exit this level, you must locate the locked door and then cross the pitfalls without losing your balance. Falling into these holes will drop you onto the second layer, where you will ultimately need to locate a separate exit. But now let's rewind time and take a closer look at this level. So first off, I want to see what the player model looks like from another angle. And well, let's just say we didn't enter level 0 unarmed. The player's right arm is completely missing, and there's a floating set of arms directly in front of our torso. When the player is sprinting, these arms will actually retract upwards above our head, and it's pretty funny looking. Although I probably don't need to mention it, we are also missing our head, making us the scariest monster within this maze. Of course, the removed head and the arms in front of us are for the first-person camera, so we can get a perspective of our arms during certain movements. Next, let's take a look at the entirety of this map from an aerial view. And in doing so, we'll find that it's not in fact infinite. This map is pretty massive though, especially considering there are 2 layers for the player to explore. Looking at them from the side really gives you perspective on how large this area actually is. Hovering way out of bounds, we can find a large gray time card with a date and time on it just floating out here. While I was flying around this map, I also noticed something else that was quite interesting. Just behind the area where the player spawns in, there is a small box made of these yellow walls, and within it is the Howler themselves. They're just kind of hanging out in here, waiting to be called into the map. The reason they are contained in a box is that 1, they don't move, but 2, they're boxed in so that their visibility cannot see the player anywhere on the map. This is so the Howler can't spot you through walls that may only be rendered on one side. Putting this concept to the test, at this point I decided to break down the wall behind the player's spawn and take a look at them myself. And although they have no way to reach the player, they will still begin howling with their chase music playing in the background. It was a little noisy for my taste though, so I dropped them into the void. Ah, peace at last. Speaking of the Howler though, I want to see how they work within the map itself. So I restarted the level and began heading through the maze. Once the monster spawns in, you can see that they just sort of appear not far from the player. While they're out of sight, they will also begin teleporting to random locations near the player, so that the player can never truly lose them entirely. If this wasn't done, it'd be possible for the player to never see the monster at all. Moving into their line of sight, we can watch from another perspective as they pursue the player and eventually jump scare us. Their jump scare animation shows them violently grappling the player before we explode into half a dozen or so pieces. They are definitely a lot stronger than they look. Now upon respawning, I stumbled upon something quite bizarre. Near this area where you spawn in, there's another copy of myself just kind of standing there. Only this copy had its head and arms still attached. How do I know that this is me, you ask? Well, killing them also kills me. I guess what they say is true. Trust nobody, not even yourself. This possible accidental duplication had to have occurred at some point while I was breaking the game. I'm just not exactly sure how, unless it had a different purpose. Before moving on, I want to see what the animation looks like when we climb the ladder to obtain the key. And I was not disappointed. When we begin climbing the ladder, our disconnected arms just sort of appear at the top, where they grab the key and then T-pose their way back down. If we take a look at that shelf, we'll also find that the key never leaves this spot after we grab it. That's it for this map though, so let's head into level 1, the Habitable Zone. So upon reaching the next level, we enter this large parking lot area. We immediately find an elevator that requires a code to access. and you're supposed to use the cars in the far end of the garage to obtain said code. I, accidentally guessed the code though, so that saves me a quick trip across the parking lot. After reaching the next floor, we must obtain 4 keys that are required to open a vault door, all while avoiding the skin stealer, this floor's entity. Heading downstairs, we must venture into the darkness and locate an elevator that will take us to the next floor. Once more, trying to avoid the skin stealer. From here, we must unlock this large gate, and to do so, we must pass through the hub. The hub is a room that can be accessed in various ways, including through hidden doors found within certain levels. Beyond this room, there's a hallway where we solve a puzzle and then open the gate using a computer. Heading through said gate, you will enter yet another parking garage where we must avoid the darkness or risk being jump scared by the smilers. You must search these hallways to find the exit, where you will then move on to Pipe Dream, a massive, dimly lit tunnel. Heading to the left, we eventually come to an unlit hallway, and after grabbing a flashlight, we will be chased through the dark by another smiler. This leads us to the electrical station where the next level begins. So going back in time, we can take a look around this garage area with the lights on. And it's a lot less scary this way. There really isn't much to see on this first floor though, so we're going to head down the elevator to the Skin Stealer's domain. The very first thing I want to do is take a look at them up close. And with the lights on, we can see every terrifying detail. They have a giant vertical mouth lined with sharp teeth, stretching from their head down to their waist, and what looks like blood all over their body. We can watch them attack the player from another perspective. They will begin sprinting toward us, and upon coming in contact with the player, their jump scare animation plays out. What's interesting is at the moment we die, the Skin Stealer, well, steals our skin. They will A-pose for a split second before taking the form of their victim. I, of course, couldn't move on before getting my revenge, so I destroyed a bit of the floor and then let them fall endlessly into the void. Now, before we move on, I wanted to see if we could make this level a bit more difficult. So I spawned in 4 extra Skin Stealers before attempting it again. Now, as per usual, they spend most of their time in the back section of the garage, and I felt pretty confident I could simply sneak by them. However, I somehow managed to alert 3 of them pretty much immediately. After they had left, I attempted to sneak alongside them into the back, and sadly, caught their attention once more. As I tried to use the door to evade them, they managed to catch up to me, and I unfortunately died. We're not done with these guys yet though, as I went back through the map and spawned in a ton of Skin Stealers. They just sort of wander around this map, and they almost look like Sims characters as they do. It's pretty fun to watch. Also, some of them have a strange infatuation with walls, and they'll just sort of stare at them for long periods of time. Glorious! Still with the place now infested by these terrifying monsters, I head back in, and immediately alert the horde. With so many of them in the area, it's pretty much impossible to evade them, and I instantly die again. You win this round, Skin Stealers. Moving on to the next floor, this garage area is typically super dark. And it's not regular darkness either. This is advanced darkness. The flashlight really doesn't do anything here, and we must wander this multi-floor parking area practically blind. With the lights on though, it's a lot easier to navigate. Flying out of bounds, we can take another look at this area. And while doing so, I noticed something pretty cool. Behind some of these locked doors, we'll find a couple of fence pieces and what looks like an elevator shaft. There are a handful of these throughout this level, and I believe these are potential locations where the elevator can spawn in. Each time this map is reloaded, the elevator will change its position, and the other possible spawn locations will have their doors locked. Beyond this, there really isn't a lot to look at in this map, so let's move on. So typically, we have to unlock this door in order to access the next part of the level. But ain't nobody got time for that. So we destroy the door, and then head into this large parking area. Now typically, this area has flickering lights and a bunch of smilers just staring you down. But because we never used that switch to open the door, we've broken the game's usual sequence of events. That means we can explore this area safely without having to worry about smilers. We can also walk upstairs and check it out, and only after breaking the game this way did I realize that this was an explorable part of the map. There are a couple of hallways up here and a few doors as well, but none of them lead anywhere. I later learned that these smilers are also incapable of accessing this ramp, and if we can make it up here during regular gameplay, we'll be completely safe. Now, if we wanted to, we could locate the exit door and proceed onto the next level. But before doing so, let's backtrack and take a look at the hub. So after heading through that smaller door, we enter a completely separate map. Zooming out, we'll see that this hub area is actually a lengthy S-shaped tunnel. We're unable to explore beyond this main area due to some invisible barriers, but if we move the player beyond them, we can take a look for ourselves. There is nothing over here on this side though, so I decided to head to the other side, where I found that this section actually extends just beyond the tunnel. There's a small bit of road sticking out here, with 2 road signs on either side. And we can also see that the entrance itself is encased in brick. Now, if we take a look underneath that security room, we will actually find an isothermal container. It's a small cylindrical container with wheels, and 2 containers of acetylene right beside it. I don't remember encountering this during my playthrough of this area, so I'm not exactly sure of its purpose. If you guys know what this is, let me know in the comments. Also in the void, we'll find a small piece of what looks like roofing or flooring of some kind, with a hole punched out of the center. It's just floating out here not far from that container. And once more, I'm not sure what this is for. Now within the main tunnel area, we'll find a handful of doors, and they can only be accessed after being unlocked in their respective levels. Taking a look out of bounds, we'll find that most of these doors lead to a small room. It's actually really cool taking a look at these rooms from out here, as they're each themed after the level they grant access to. Some of these are incomplete with missing walls and ceilings, and others are fully modeled and furnished inside. So when we enter the security area and turn the lights on, we'll see an area similar to level 0 just beyond this window. Entering this area, with the lighting effects turned off though, we will see that before we turn the power on, the level 0 area simply doesn't exist. This window leads straight into the void, and we can even see the tunnel in the distance. The moment we turn the power on, it will seem to magically appear out of thin air. This area does in fact have walkable ground though, so if we move the player inside, we can take a look around for ourselves. That's it for the hub though, so let's open the gate and head back to the parking garage area. So now that the gate has been opened properly, the smilers are now spawning as intended. It's a bit harder playing through this portion of the game with the lights on though, as we can't see when this garage goes dark. We can, however, take a closer look at the smilers, and they are super creepy looking. They almost remind me of the SCP-087 face, or even the Smile Dog. We can also watch from another angle as they jump scare the player, and as you can see, they sort of just duck downwards and then leap onto our model. But now, let's mess with our creepy, grinning adversaries. I feel like escaping them on this ramp wasn't enough, and instead we have to get rid of them for good. So I deleted a bunch of the floor panels within this map and then planted myself directly in the center. My plan was to lure them towards me and then drop them into the endless void. But fate had other plans. They begin heading towards me and fall into the hole, but they manage to get close enough to my player controller and they trigger a jump scare. They're currently in a free fall, so the animation does not play out, but we still die anyway. But we're not done yet! We can build our defenses stronger! We have the technology! This time I went to the very far side of the garage and cut out a large section of the floor. Hypothetically large enough that they will be incapable of reaching the player. So I put myself on this little island of safety, and they come after me once again. This time we are successful, and they begin falling into the vast nothingness of space. They fall far below this map, and at this point I believe I've beaten them for good. However, one of the smilers somehow managed to get behind me, and the moment I touch this wall, I get jump scared. I was not expecting this to happen, and it gave me a pretty good scare. So in my desperation, I did the only logical thing I could think of. I summoned a few dozen more smilers. Ironically, this was the only method of stopping them that worked, as loading too many of them at the same time seemed to break their AI. Because of this, they're unable to follow me, and I can even walk through them without getting jump scared. Welp, I guess we'll call it a draw. Now, let's take a quick look at pipe dreams. The moment we exit this parking garage, we find ourselves within a massive tunnel. This thing is incredibly large, and it stretches way into the distance. I honestly felt like it would never end during my playthrough, which is pretty on brand for the Backrooms. If we head down the right side of the hallway, reaching a certain point will spawn in a smiler. Unlike the others though, this one is actually fully modeled with a completely black spider-like body. This particular smiler will only pursue the player as long as they are trying to enter this side of the tunnel, and we can watch as they load and unload as we hit their trigger. Moving the camera beyond this trigger, we'll see a small orange room with a ladder inside. This is actually the entrance to a level called Fun, which we will access a bit later in the game. For now, it is simply an empty hallway, and cannot be used even if we move the player over here. What's kinda interesting is that while I was over here, another smiler spawned in and began heading towards me. I hid inside this little room, and after passing me, they actually just left the map entirely, endlessly running into the empty space. So now it's time to mess with this creature a little bit, only this time I wanted to make them far more menacing than before. So I spawned in a ton of them all at once, and because they were moving as I did, it resulted in this horrifying centipede. They're truly a thing of nightmares, and the sound they made was equally terrifying. Have a listen. They continued to crawl their way towards me, and it was incredibly intimidating watching this beast approach. When they finally reached me, they began a chain of jump scares. One after another, they lunged forward, and they even split into 2 separate centipedes at one point. Then they continued on, searching for their next victim. But with that brings us to the end of these first areas in Escape the Backrooms. So I just released a new trailer for my horror game Zardy's Maze 2. If you want to check it out, click the video on screen now and give it a wish list on Steam. I think you're all going to enjoy this.